The notification sound from my phone broke the silence of my apartment. Another message from David. My stomach fluttered as I reached for my phone, knowing it was probably another one of his philosophical musings that had kept me awake well past midnight for the past 3 weeks. We had connected on a book discussion forum, a place where literature enthusiasts debated character motivations and plot twists. His username, Kafka's By the Sea, had caught my attention when he posted a defense of a book everyone else was tearing apart. The eloquence in his reasoning, the compassion in his understanding of flawed characters. I knew I had to message him privately. You don't think 3 a.m. is too late to discuss whether people truly change or just become more of who they always were? Read his latest message. I smiled in the dark of my bedroom, the blue light of my phone illuminating my face. For this topic, I'd stay up till sunrise, I typed back. I was Emma Reeves, 32, living in Boston, working as a museum curator, and struggling with the particulars of modern dating. 3 serious relationships had ended without warning, leaving me cautious and withdrawn. My therapist called it emotional self-preservation. My best friend Nora called it hiding. Either way, chatting with a stranger on the internet felt safe. No pressure, no expectations, just the pure exchange of thoughts and ideas. David lived in Portland, Oregon, a comfortable 3,000 miles away. Distance was our safety net. Our conversations grew from literature to personal philosophies, childhood memories, professional frustrations, and daily observations. I found myself reaching for my phone first thing each morning, checking for messages from him before, even, getting out of bed. Have you ever felt like your life is split into before and after someone? He asked one evening. The question lingered in my mind for hours. Not yet, I finally replied, but I think I'm beginning to understand how that might feel. 3 months into our digital friendship, David suggested a video call. My heart hammered against my ribs as I considered it. Was I ready to cross that threshold? To put a face to the words that had become my daily comfort? The thought terrified me. What if the magic disappeared once reality entered the equation? I've grown too attached to your words to risk ruining it, I confessed. Words are just one dimension of a person. He wrote back. Don't you think we deserve to experience each other in full color? I stared at my ceiling that night, thinking about dimensions and colors, about risk and reward, about the butterflies in my stomach every time his name appeared on my screen. Butterflies I hadn't felt in years. The following Friday evening, I sat at my kitchen table, hair freshly washed, wearing a casual blue blouse that my friend said brought out my eyes. My laptop was open, the video chat program ready, my finger hovering over the call button. I took a deep breath and clicked. The screen flickered before revealing David's face. Dark, expressive eyebrows over kind brown eyes, a slight dimple in his left cheek as he smiled nervously, tousled dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it multiple times before our call. He was handsome in an approachable way, not intimidatingly perfect, but genuinely attractive. Hi, Emma, he said, his voice deeper than I'd imagined, with a slight rasp that sent an unexpected thrill through me. Hi, David. My voice quavered slightly. For a moment, we both just looked at each other, absorbing this new information, adding texture and dimension to the mental images we'd constructed over months of written exchanges. This is strange, isn't it? He finally said, breaking the silence. Completely strange. I agreed with a nervous laugh. Good strange, though. Good strange, he echoed, the dimple deepening. What was supposed to be a quick 30-minute get-to-know-you chat stretched into 5 hours. We talked until my laptop battery warned it was about to die. His animated expressions as he described the bookstore where he worked. The way he tilted his head when listening to me talk about a challenging exhibition I was curating. The comfortable silences that felt as natural as our written exchanges. "We should do this again," he said as we reluctantly prepared to end the call. "Definitely," I nodded, already mourning the end of our conversation. "Tomorrow." The hopeful note in his voice mirrored my own feelings. Video calls became our new normal. Weeknights after work. Weekend mornings with coffee. Our conversations flowed between serious and silly, professional and personal. I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone. About my parents' divorce when I was 12, my fear of professional stagnation, my recurring dream about being lost in a familiar city. "I wish I could take you to this cafe near my apartment," he said one evening, after I'd mentioned craving a good chai latte. "They make them with cardamom and star anise. It's life-changing." I smiled at the screen. "I wish you could too." The unspoken hung between us. 3,000 miles. Different lives. Different cities. An impossible situation that neither of us had addressed directly until he did. "I have vacation time coming up next month," he said casually, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I've always wanted to see Boston in the fall." My heart leapt into my throat. "Boston has the best fall," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "The leaves in the public garden alone are worth the trip." "Would it be completely crazy if I came to visit?" His eyes searched mine through the screen, just to see if we're as compatible in person as we are like this. Was it crazy? Probably. Was I going to say no? Absolutely not. "I think we owe it to ourselves to find out," I said. The 4 weeks leading up to his visit passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. I cleaned my apartment obsessively, bought new sheets for the guest bedroom, made lists of places to take him. Nora teased me mercilessly about my internet boyfriend, but I could see the concern behind her jokes. "Just be careful," she said, as she helped me select outfits for the week he'd be staying. "People can be different in real life." "I know him," I insisted, though doubt nibbled at the edges of my certainty. Did I really know him? Or had I constructed an idealized version based on carefully crafted messages and video calls? Standing at the airport arrival gate, I felt like I might be sick from nervousness. My hands were clammy, and I kept smoothing down my hair, wishing I'd worn something different, wishing I'd suggested meeting at a restaurant instead, wishing, and then he was there, emerging from the crowd with a small suitcase, scanning the faces until his eyes found mine. His smile was exactly as it appeared on my screen, but now it was real, and directed at me with no digital barrier between us. He walked toward me, and I toward him, until we stood facing each other in the middle of the busy terminal. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I echoed, suddenly shy, despite our months of intimate conversations. He hesitated, then opened his arms slightly, in question. I stepped forward into his embrace, and the warmth of him, the solidity, the smell of his cologne, mixed with the indescribable scent that was uniquely him. It all crashed over me in a wave. This was real. He was real. The first day was awkward. Both of us hyper-aware of our physical presence, overthinking every gesture, every touch. But by the evening, as we walked along the Charles River at sunset, something shifted. He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "This is better than I imagined," he said, looking out at the golden light reflecting off the water. "And I imagined it pretty great." I squeezed his hand. "Me too. 7 days. That's all we had. We packed them full. Museums and parks, restaurants and hidden neighborhood gems. But the moments I treasured most were the quiet ones. Making breakfast together in my small kitchen, reading books side by side on my couch, discovering that he hummed absent-mindedly while washing dishes. On his 5th night in Boston, we sat on my apartment rooftop with a bottle of wine, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. The city lights stretched before us, and above, a surprising number of stars were visible despite the urban glow. "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply, his eyes on the sky rather than on me. "I think I started months ago, but being here, with you, it's made everything clearer." My heart expanded in my chest. "I'm terrified," I admitted, "of these feelings, of the distance, of how much I'll miss you when you leave." He turned to me then, his expression serious. "What if I didn't leave? Or at least, what if I came back? Soon and often. We live across the country from each other," I reminded him, though I wished it weren't true. "People figure these things out all the time," he said, taking my hand. "If they want it badly enough, did I want it badly enough?" Looking at him in the starlight, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine, I knew the answer was yes. His departure was harder than I'd anticipated. The airport goodbye, the first night alone in my apartment that now felt too quiet, too empty. Our video calls resumed, but they were different now, charged with physical memory, with the knowledge of what it felt like to be in each other's presence. "I've been thinking about relocating," he said casually during one of our calls. 2 weeks after his visit, the bookstore has a sister location in Cambridge. They've been looking for someone with management experience. My heart stuttered. "Are you serious?" "I've already spoken to them," he admitted. "They want me to come for an interview next month." "Isn't this fast?" I asked, even as joy bubbled up inside me. He smiled that crooked smile that I'd grown to love. "Probably. But I've never been more certain about anything or anyone." 3 months later, David moved to Boston. He found an apartment in Somerville, not far from mine. We agreed to maintain our separate spaces for a while, to give our relationship room to grow naturally in the real world. But I found myself at his place more often than my own, helping him arrange furniture, hanging artwork, making it feel like home. "Do you regret it?" I asked one evening as we unpacked boxes of books. "Moving across the country for someone you met on the internet." He stopped what he was doing and crossed the room to me, taking my face in his hands. "Not for a second," he said, and kissed me with such tenderness that tears sprang to my eyes. Our relationship wasn't without challenges. David struggled to adjust to East Coast winters. I had moments of panic, wondering if we'd rushed things. We had our first real fight 4 months after he moved, about something trivial that spiraled into deeper insecurities. I stormed out of his apartment, convinced I'd made a terrible mistake by letting someone get so close. But he showed up at my door an hour later, his hair dusted with snowflakes. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "Not unless you truly want me to." I didn't want him to. That was the terrifying truth I had to face. I'd fallen completely in love with him, and the thought of losing him was worse than the fear of being hurt. A year after our first video call, David took me back to the rooftop where he'd first told me he loved me. He'd arranged a small table with candles, wine, and a view of the city we now shared. "Do you remember what we talked about up here?" he asked as we finished dinner. "You said you were falling in love with me," I recalled, smiling at the memory. "And you said you were terrified." I laughed. "I was. Are you still?" His expression was serious, intent. I considered the question. "Not of loving you," I said honestly. But life is still scary sometimes. He reached across the table for my hand. What if we faced it together officially? Before I could process his words, he was kneeling beside me, a small box in his hand. Emma Reeves, meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Loving you has made me braver, kinder, more myself than I've ever been. Will you marry me? The ring was simple and perfect. A sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the city lights. Through tears, I nodded. Yes, I managed to say. Absolutely yes. We were married the following spring in the Boston Public Garden, surrounded by blooming tulips and the friends who had supported our unconventional romance. Nora, who had eventually warmed to David after seeing how happy he made me, was my maid of honor. His brother flew in from Portland to be his best man. If anyone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be marrying someone I met in an online forum, I would have laughed in their face. I said in my vows, "But you, David, have taught me that the most beautiful beginnings can come from the most unexpected places." Our honeymoon was a road trip down the California coast, a middle ground between his West Coast roots and my East Coast life. We talked about our future, about possibly starting a family, about career dreams and travel aspirations. Everything felt possible with him by my side. But 3 months after our wedding, the headaches started. At first they were mild. David would wince slightly, take an aspirin, and continue with his day. But they grew more frequent, more intense. After a particularly severe episode that left him vomiting from pain, I insisted he see a doctor. Tests were ordered, specialists consulted, and then the diagnosis that shattered our world. A brain tumor, aggressive, inoperable due to its location, 6 months to a year with treatment, the oncologist said gently, as I gripped David's hand, so tightly my knuckles turned white. The drive home from the hospital was silent, both of us processing the unimaginable. How could this be happening? We'd just found each other. We'd just started our life together. It was brutally, cosmically unfair. That night, after I thought David had fallen asleep, I slipped into the bathroom and broke down, muffling my sobs against a towel so he wouldn't hear. But moments later, the door opened, and he was there, gathering me into his arms despite his own fear. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against my hair. "I'm so sorry this is happening to us. Don't you dare apologize," I said fiercely through my tears. "This isn't your fault." He held my face in his hands, his eyes full of love and determination. Despite the devastating news we'd received, we are going to make the most of whatever time we have. I promise you that. And we did. David underwent chemotherapy and radiation, enduring the harsh side effects with a grace that broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. I took a leave of absence from the museum to be with him, to accompany him to every appointment, to hold his hand through the worst days. Between treatments, when he felt strong enough, we created a bucket list, not of grand adventures. He didn't have the energy for those, but of small, meaningful experiences. We watched the sunrise from the beach, planted a garden that we knew he might not see bloom, recorded videos for future anniversaries I would face alone. I don't regret a single moment, he told me one evening as we lay in bed, his body thin and weakened, but his spirit undimmed. Finding you, loving you, it's been worth everything. "Even this?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. He was quiet for a long moment. "Even this," he finally said, "because the alternative would have been never knowing you at all." 8 months after his diagnosis, on a peaceful October morning, with golden leaves drifting past our bedroom window, David took his last breath, his hand in mine. The world continued turning, incomprehensibly, without him in it. The grief was an ocean I thought would drown me. Some days, it nearly did. I raged against the universe that had given me such perfect love, only to snatch it away so cruelly. I slept with his sweaters, tried to preserve his scent on his pillow. I read and reread our early messages, desperate to hear his voice in my head. Nora moved in with me for a while, making sure I ate, drawing me back into the world of the living one painful step at a time. David's brother came for an extended visit, and together we sorted through David's things, sharing stories and tears in equal measure. 6 months after his death, I found the strength to return to the bookstore where he had worked. The staff embraced me, shared memories of him. In the poetry section, I found a book he'd mentioned in one of our earliest conversations. Inside, he had left a note, dated before his diagnosis, perhaps sensing even then that our time might be limited. Emma, it read, "If you're reading this, I'm guessing things didn't go the way we hoped. I need you to know that loving you has been the great privilege of my life. Please don't let our story make you afraid to love again. Some people spend decades together and never experience what we had. It wasn't long enough. Nothing would have been, but it was extraordinary. Live fully, my love. Find joy again. I'll be watching for you in the sunset." I clutched the book to my chest, tears streaming down my face in the middle of the quiet bookstore. But for the first time since his death, they weren't only tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude too, for having been loved so completely, so perfectly, if only for a short time. 2 years have passed since I lost David. The pain hasn't disappeared, but it has transformed, become part of the fabric of who I am, rather than an all-consuming fire. I returned to the museum, curated an exhibition on love letters throughout history, including some of our early messages, anonymized of course. I still visit our rooftop on special days. His birthday, our anniversary, the day we met online. I bring a glass of wine and talk to him about my day, about the future, about how loving him changed me permanently for the better. Last week, I helped a young colleague set up a profile on a book discussion forum. "You never know who you might meet," I told her with a bittersweet smile. "Aren't you afraid of online connections after everything?" she asked hesitantly. I thought about David's note, about the extraordinary love we shared, about the courage it takes to open oneself to possibilities. Some things are worth the risk. I said simply, some people are worth any pain that might follow. As I walked home through the autumn evening, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. I stopped to watch it sink below the horizon, feeling a familiar presence beside me, within me. I married a man I met online. Our time together was briefer than we deserved, but more beautiful than I could have imagined. And even knowing how it would end, I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Some loves are worth everything they cost us. David taught me that. It's his legacy, and I carry it with me always. The courage to reach toward connection, toward love, no matter the distance, no matter the risk. The greatest plot twist wasn't the tragedy that cut our story short. It was that even in its brevity, our love was enough. More than enough, it was everything.